All right, so what is the update on 3iAtlas? It's been a few days since I've talked about it, so I thought it was about time for an update. In case you're new to my channel, my name is Dr. Jennifer Lisa Vest. I'm also known as the Ethical Psychic. I am a medical intuitive and a psychic medium. I also have a background in physics. So I like to come on here and talk about 3iAtlas in terms of what astrophysicists are saying. And then I also like to tune in and, channel and get information about the interstellar object myself. So let's get into it. What's new of late? So for those of you who've been following this, you know that we haven't been getting a lot of information about this object, even though it's arguably one of the most exciting astronomical events in a long time, possibly in the lifetime of many astrophysicists. There's not a whole lot of talk about it. There aren't any press releases. There aren't a lot of papers coming out. And although some people are saying, oh, it's the government shutdown, well, actually, the shutdown began on October 1st. They had information long before that. And there was very little information released even before the shutdown. And also keep in mind that the shutdown only affects the US government, and there are satellites and telescopes and rovers that belong to other space agencies in Europe, in India, in China, and we have not heard much from them either. So a lot of people find this suspicious. I'm one of the people that finds this suspicious. Also, because of what I know about how science research is done, I know that a lot of scientists who would be studying this type of phenomena are not directly paid by the government, and so their job doesn't end the day the government shuts down. They still have jobs. They're still doing their research. They're just not reporting about it. So certainly it is true that for certain employees, they may not be getting paid or they may be on furlough, but that just isn't the case for a lot of astrophysicists. But let's talk about what's new. So the newest thing that's come out, and I actually have got it from a few different sources. It came on NBC News that there has been a non-gravitational acceleration of the interstellar object. This is coming out of the ALMA Observatory. There was a statistically significant deviation from the expected acceleration. There was also information from the JPL website showing that about 20% of the mass of the object was lost. But we had this Mars reconnaissance orbiter that was supposed to be able to get really good pictures around October 3rd when the object flew by Mars. And October 1st, there was a shutdown and we didn't receive anything. But we do know that people are working and they are gathering data, but they're just not sharing it. So we got to find out what we can, right? And so this is interesting. And this was one of the things that people were looking for. They were saying, if this is not a comet, we should expect to see some acceleration that we cannot explain from gravitation. Now, some people will say, well, another thing that could cause the object to accelerate would be if it did some really heavy outgassing, if it, started melting and it started losing a lot of mass. That mass could propel it forward. That also does assume there is a tail, which there was not. And the other thing we have to keep in mind about that idea, that hypothesis of maybe it's melting and outgassing and losing mass in a particular direction, which is then propelling it forward. What we have to keep in mind is this thing is not near the sun. I mean, not compared to other comets. It's like 4 AU away from the sun. So it's quite a bit further away from the sun than I think it was Umama Mama. I don't know how to say that one. Someone correct me in the comments. Uwama Wama. Oma, something like that. It had a really cool name. That was the last interstellar, I think, one of the last interstellar objects. This one was quite a bit further away, and so we really weren't expecting it to have, like, the sun to have a huge impact on it, such that it would actually start accelerating. But of course, that is a possible explanation. The thing is, there have been so many anomalies. It's not like, oh, it just had this one anomaly of this, unpredicted non-gravitational acceleration. There's just been so many. So in recent days, we had another anomaly, and that was that it was suddenly blue. And, the color has to do with the temperature. And so some astronomer, and there was a paper that came out, it's on the preprints, which is like ARXIV, I think. If you go to the preprints, there's a preprint out about the brightness. And so it's much brighter than expected, and it's blue, which indicates it's, what is it? Hotter than the sun. And that doesn't really make sense if it's a comet, right? Comets are like big balls of ice. They're certainly not, they don't have their own heat source. They're not going to be hotter than the sun. And so now some people are saying, well, maybe it's outgassing certain chemical compounds, which are making it look blue when it's really not hot. People are coming up with different ideas about what this could be. But again, it's an anomaly. And an anomaly is something that doesn't fit the stellar physics. It's not what you expect to see. And it's something that you can't readily explain. Now, of course, people are trying to figure out, can we explain this? Can we explain this? But there's now like 10 different anomalies that they're trying to explain. And what some people have pointed out is that mathematically, the probability of all of these anomalies happening at the same time, the probability of this being a comet and having this many anomalies, the probability is really, really, really low, close to zero. So I want to actually read from a post I saw about the probability. Okay, I want to read this post by a Redditor. So there's several Reddits on 3iAtlas. And here's someone, it's a mixture of people, right? You got some people here with scientific background. You got, people with, not the best, grasp of logic. You got wild theories. It's a real mix, right? That's how the internet is. But I found this person compelling. Their handle is Little Eve Gnome 21. And they claim that simple mathematics dictates that you have a better chance of winning the lottery 15 times in a row than this thing actually being a comet. I just think that's hilarious, just the way they put it. They said, I'm saying she because I'm assuming it's a she. People keep repeating comet like it's a magic word, and it's not. Math is the only adult in the room. If you stack the actual anomalies and their odds like a parlay, the number you get is so tiny it is basically zero. Math don't lie, homie. Humor is important, right? So here are the individual legs and the assumed likelihoods. These are deliberately conservative bins to avoid drama. Tighten any bin and the final number only gets smaller. Number 1, approach close to the ecliptic plane, assumed likelihood 1 in 500. So that references how the approach of this object just kind of perfectly matches the elliptic plane where our planets are all rotating around our sun. And so they rotate in this thing called an elliptic plane. And when you look at the probability of anything approaching our solar system from any possible direction, the likelihood of it being on a trajectory that exactly matches the elliptic plane of our planets, thus allowing it to do these close flybys of Mars and Venus and Earth, is just, it's not very likely, and it's 1 in 500. I guess I combined the first two. Number 2 is multi-planet threading near Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. Assumed likelihood 1 in 1,000. So those are 2 things I combined. The elliptic plane is one thing, and then the fact that it's threading, like that it's passing close by these 3 planets at the same time, without moving, right? It was already on that trajectory. So this was plotted possibly way in advance, or it was just chance, right? Number 3, the speed profile is inconsistent with Garden Variety comet outgassing, assumed likelihood 1 in 200. Now, one, objection that people will make to that is they'll say, well, we can't really compare this to Garden Variety comets because this is an interstellar comet, right? So most of our science is based on comets that are not interstellar. They're based on comets that we've observed. And we've only had the technology for a few years, I think maybe like 10 years, to actually detect interstellar comets. And so it's possible that there's been a whole bunch of them and they've all acted like this, but we just don't know about it because we didn't have the machinery to detect them. So, there's a counter argument against that anomaly being a true anomaly. Number 4, size and brightness versus dust production mismatch. Assumed likelihood 1 in 300. So what that references is that by them measuring the size of it and its brightness, they're able to estimate like how much dust there should be around it. And it doesn't match. So their calculations aren't coming up correctly. They can't make sense of how it can be the size it is, not have a dust plume, like it doesn't have a tail that would be associated with outgassing, and yet it has a certain brightness. So I don't know that I know enough about this to go into detail about it, but if you do, put it in the comments. But basically they don't match, right? So they can look at the brightness and then they can predict how much outgassing it should have or how big the dust plume should be, and vice versa. And these things just don't match, right? Number 5, composition outlier relative to normal comet gas ratios, assumed likelihood 1 in 200. So I think they're talking about what their spectrographs have picked up in terms of what the chemical composition is of, the dust or whatever chemicals are around it. So like they found nickel, they didn't find iron, they found a very small amount of water and a large amount of carbon dioxide. Like all of the things they were picking up, none of them really match models they have for what they would expect from a comet. And so she's actually kind of combining a few anomalies into smaller, I feel like, but I don't know. I've been looking at, Avi Loeb's anomalies. I've also been looking at Dobsonian Powers anomalies. And so different people have different lists. Okay. Number 6, strong activity far from the sun around 3.5 AU. Oh, I said 4 AU. I was a little off. 3.5 astronomical units instead of the usual near 2 astronomical units, likelihood 1 in 100. So that references the fact that even though it's like twice as far away from the sun as the other comets that we've seen, and they're kind of including all the comets. So we've seen a lot of comets pass by the sun, and we've seen what happens when they pass by the sun, how there's all this sublimation, all this outgassing, a decrease in mass, like certain things that we expect to see. But this object is actually not near the sun, and it's more active than the other comets that have been studied, which were closer to the sun. And so that's that anomaly. Apparently the likelihood is 1 in 100. 7, morphology and reflection behavior that looks structured, not a bland, diffuse coma, assumed likelihood 1 in 5. So I think that references its shape, right? Like it doesn't seem to have the shape that they would normally expect from a comet, and it doesn't reflect light the way they expect a comet to. And this one's really interesting to me because you may recall, if you heard my first channeling, when I first channeled 3iAtlas about maybe a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that I was told was that they would not be able to image this thing in the way that they image other interstellar objects because its composition reflected light in a different way. So I actually said that before I heard this data. So this feels like confirmation of my channeling. Okay. So she lays out all of these, she or he, we don't know their pronouns. She, she, or they, we'll just say they. Lays out all of these anomalies and their likelihood. And then they do something called parlay math, where they multiply the legs because they consider these to be independent or semi-independent odds, and they want to stack them. So they go through that list, right? 1 in 500 times 1,000 gives 1 in 50, 500,000 times 200 gives 1 in. Anyway, I can't even read all these numbers. They get so big. The final product is about 1 in 3 quadrillion. So this person says, you're asking me to believe a regular common explanation that sits at 1 in 3 quadrillion. That's fantasy land. You'd have a better chance of winning a major lottery 15 times in a row. And so, and then they do say, well, you know, if you think that maybe these aren't all independent, right, probabilities, then, you know, you could even, what did they say? If you do think they correlate a little bit, because if things correlate and they're not independent, then you don't multiply all the probabilities, right? So the person says, well, even if 2 or 3 of the legs share causes by a factor of 10, you're still buried in the trillion scale odds, right? So like there's wiggle room, right, in this mathematical approach. Yeah, so I just found this really interesting. This this just discussion of the probability, you know, and the unlikeliness of a comet having this many anomalies, this many things that just, you know, can't easily be explained or just are very, very, very unlikely, right? So it's not that they necessarily can never be explained or you know, like there's no explanation for them. That's not what they're saying, but they're saying, you know, the probability of this, you know, happening is so incredibly remote as to approach 0. Now, a lot of, you know, people have critiqued this, and, you know, I'm not a maths major. I was a physics major. I did do a lot of math, but that was a while ago. And so, but I find it interesting. Okay. So maybe the math isn't exactly right. Maybe these probabilities are not exactly right. They do sound similar to the ones I heard Avi Loeb making, but I don't know if they're exactly the same because I didn't go and check. But what it tells us, I think, is that this thing is super interesting and nothing like what we've seen before. And that alone should result in lots of papers coming out, lots of announcements, lots of news, right? This should be the talk of the town. Why isn't it? It's the talk of just a few of us in isolated parts of the internet who are, you know, astrophysics nerds and channelers who are connecting to our starseed origins, right? We're the only ones that are like, oh, you know, all riled up about this. But I do think there are a lot of astrophysicists who are very excited about this. We're just not hearing about it yet. Now, the exciting thing about November 4th today, apart from the election, is that it's now visible. So it's now come out from behind the sun, and now amateur astronomers can once again see 3iAtlas. Okay, now I want to refer to a paper that I found on arxiv.org. This is a place where scientists can upload preprints of, you know, scientific papers that have not yet been peer reviewed, but they're usually under peer review at the time, but that process can take a few months. So in the meantime, they put up these preprints of their paper for everybody to read. And there have not been a lot of them. I think there should have been more than we've seen. I've counted only 8 preprints for the entire month of October on this really fascinating object. But here's one with the title Interstellar Comet 3iAtlas, Evidence for Galactic Cosmic Ray Processing. And the authors are Maggiolo, Doogie, Grunoff, De Kaiser, and Cessator. And they're coming out of Belgium, Virginia. Yeah, Belgium and Virginia. NASA Langley Research Center in Hampton, and also the Royal Belgian Institute for Space Aeronomy in Brussels, Belgium. And so in the abstract, they say that they're looking at the spectral observations, and there's this unprecedented composition that they're finding having to do with the CO levels, and they're comparing it to laboratory experiments and trying to figure out, what's, I think, they're trying to explain like the color and whatnot, the coma. They're looking at the composition of the coma and the erosion rate. But let me skip to the part that I think is interesting with regard to my prediction a couple of weeks ago. In their abstract, they say, quote, "This represents a paradigm shift. Long residence interstellar objects primarily reveal galactic cosmic ray process material rather than pristine material representative of their primordial formation environments. With 3iAtlas approaching perihelion in October, immediate follow-up observations are critical to confirm this interpretation and establish GCR processing as a fundamental evolutionary pathway for interstellar objects." Right? So we're talking about paradigm shifting stellar physics that's happening right now. So you would expect a lot more brouhaha about this. And this is not the first paper that said that, but this is one that just came out. And this is what they said to me, right? A couple of weeks ago when I was channeling 3iAtlas, they said they are delivering a lot of data. So I was talking to the object, which came across as a sentient rock, and was able to communicate with me. And it said, we're sending a lot of data to your scientists, and they know that we're not a comet because none of the data matches their models for comets, and that this is going to require a paradigm shift in stellar physics, astrophysics, stellar physics, right? Stellar physics specifically, well, maybe I shouldn't call it stellar physics, astrophysics, because we're looking at an object, not a star. So it's going to be a paradigm shift in astrophysics. And the scientists are not reporting a lot about it because they're kind of scurrying around trying to figure out how to make sense of this. So I do feel like this paper confirms that prediction, and that just some of the discussion I've seen seems to confirm that a paradigm shift is necessary at this point, because these anomalies, and we keep getting new anomalies every day, these anomalies keep saying, keep kind of confirming that nothing about, this object, not nothing, but a lot about this object does not match what is currently known in astrophysics about how objects moving through space operate with regard to gravity, with regard to the sun, with regard to heat, right? The physics isn't physicking in the way that it should. And so I guess that's my main update today, is that I do think the science is going to confirm what my psychic medium information found. And for those of you who know me, you know that I have a background in science. I'm also a psychic. I believe that intuitive information and empirical data that's analyzed through the scientific method, that these different sources of knowledge should be combined so that we can have a complete view of the world. And so anytime, I get a prediction or I pick up something intuitively, I'm always looking to see, is there scientific evidence to support what I got? And sometimes it takes a while, right? Especially when you're dealing with prediction. If you make predictions, then you have to wait to see if they're going to come true. So I feel very encouraged by this paper that came out quite recently about this paradigm shift. Drop your questions in the comments or updates that you have. There's a lot more updates I could discuss, but this video is already getting long. So I'll do another video later about other updates. So, please give me a like, a follow, put a comment, And you can also follow me on Patreon. It's in my link in my description, in my bio. You can also become a member. Would love to have you. I do some behind the scenes videos for members. So thanks for following and liking and sharing. And I appreciate you listening.